Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today is Jared. He is the founder of WildKind. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Been founder of WildKind. I've been working on this project for about 4 or 5 years. It's been a heck of a journey. We've learned a lot as a team, and it's something we're really excited about for the future, especially as it relates to North American stuff that we'll get into more later. But it is there's a lot to what we do, and there's a lot we're still learning, and the science is always evolving. So it's a good place for us to be right now.
Okay, so before we go further into that, what is WildKind?
WildKind is a packaging manufacturer company. What we do specifically is focus on the flexible packaging industry. So when you think about coffee bags or chip bags and things like that, which have traditionally been made of petroplastics, things that come from oil and gas, what we do is we manufacture those things, but we base all of our ingredients from plant-based materials. And that way, we also have a better end of life. So instead of having to go either into a landfill or recycling, we actually, everything that we create is compostable. So that's how we very much differ. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. And it's definitely a newer technology that has enabled a lot of this, which is great.
So I know you have a strong background in product development. So
That's right.
How were you inspired to create WildKind?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors I think there. I think it'll be kind of hard to parse through all of them. I think what inspired me more than anything is that I really wanted to be doing something that felt good. I think with a lot of product development these days, as they relate to applications and software, which there's nothing wrong with that, it didn't feel very tangible. And so I wanted to work on something a bit more tangible that we could see a direct impact, a positive impact on the ecosystems that we're a part of, whether that's, our customer base or our stakeholders, et cetera. And that was kind of where it started from. And, there's a lot of research that kind of went into why this specific industry. And I think the timing really mapped out pretty well with the advent of a lot of newer technologies, kind of just only coming online within the last few years, that it really enabled us to jump in on it.
So previously, what kind of products had you developed before you kicked off WildKind?
Yeah, other things that I've worked on in the past have been these software applications as they connected to manufacturing processes. So we're actually a subsidiary brand of a larger company, which has been a really instrumental in helping us kind of launch this brainchild. And that company, they specialize in manufacturing, postcards and things like that, but they bridge that with applications and digital applications. And so that's what I've been working on for the last 10 or 15 years. But the timing of me coming onto that team coincided strategically with the executive team to want to do something different than what they've been doing for the last 35 years. And that's kind of how I was able to get enough space to do a lot more research to figure out how we could do something a bit better, a bit more unique. And that's kind of where it came from.
Was this a collaborative idea, or did you come up with this idea and have to figure out how to navigate it within this larger organization that you already had your full-time job?
Yeah, it was the latter. It was my idea. And it was something that, I worked with the executive team on for many months before they could really fully commit to it. I think, the amount of research I was going through and having to present over a period of months at a time, I think slowly got everyone bought into it and with the timing of it. But yeah, it was generated by me, and thankfully I have a very supportive executive team that helped us kick it off.
Well, yeah, because the first thing that comes to mind is you have a full-time job, you have an employer. How do you approach them and say, listen, I have this idea, I'd love to be able to work on this? Because that can be kind of sticky.
Yeah. I think I'm in a unique position within this organization. I was hired on to start new ideas for them. I think they had been around for a long enough period of time that they knew they needed some new ideas, either for their existing business line, and they had an appetite to do big changes. And so as a result of that, even me coming in and starting their product development team, and kind of seeing some of the success from there, I think I was able to get some goodwill before trying to present them with this larger opportunity. And I think that's kind of how the genesis of it, and how they were able to, I think, at least invest in the future that I had seen for what could be with WildKind Packaging and the packaging industry as a whole, because there's frankly not enough leadership in that industry. It's a very traditional industry, which, I learned by going to a lot of different conferences. And I think me being able to come back and say, hey, I'm in a room of like a lot of industry veterans, and I'm the only one speaking up for this path, I think that's a good thing. And I think that means there's a lot of room for us to grow and take some leadership in this space that really needs to happen, especially in North America. So that's kind of how I was able to continually build upon the idea and showcase over a period of many months that, hey, there is room here, there is room to grow, and there's nobody doing it quite like what I have envisioned. And in fact, people are pretty, especially people in the industry that have been around, they were telling me to not do it because they didn't think it was viable. But every step of the way that we were able to actually do some of the math around unit economics and, if we actually bought this and how do we sell it, I kept proving them wrong. So I think it's just a really unique space, a unique time for us to get into it.
And so what role did research play in it for you in terms of building and getting them on your side?
I mean, research was the primary role that I did for probably 2.5 years before ever being able to pull the trigger on this. I would go through a lot of industry studies to look at, what are the different packaging niches out there, different verticals, whether that's cardboard or plastics or flexible stand-up pouches, which was like a big one that I was really interested in because of the growth trajectory of that. And I think the annualized growth rate for this particular segment of the packaging industry is what really caught all of our attention. I think it was growing somewhat like 3 times any other of the packaging spaces, and it only had just gotten into the place where it could utilize digital printing technology, which was a key factor for us because we have a lot of experience in digital printing technology, and we were one of the first markets in our other business. So to say, oh, by the way, now we can still use a lot of our same expertise in this new industry that only has come online in the last year, I think was a huge green light for us, is because we could basically repeat what the parent company Quantum Digital has done, but repeat it in a new way for WildKind Packaging that we already kind of had somewhat of a blueprint and understanding of how it was going to go based on our past history.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. And I love, I often talk to founders about packaging and creating more sustainable resources because it's a challenge, right? In so many ways. You're making this product that's sustainable or regenerative, and you have all this goodwill and good intention with it. And then they put it in packaging and it's made from so many things that you're like, really, the packaging is awful. So it's not connecting with their ethos. I do know that the packaging exists, right? I mean, the packaging is out there. Some people do it. Sometimes it's a bit cost prohibitive or a variety of reasons. So what makes yours revolutionary?
There's a few things, but one thing I wanted to highlight too, another reason, a big reason for me personally, was this tension point that you just kind of alluded to of, we as a society are very consumer forward. Amazon has been growing massively over the past X years. And as somebody who loves convenience, I love the convenience of Amazon and these other companies where you can order and show up at your house. But I'd always have this moment every time I would open up a package, just like a little bit of piece of me would die. And like, what do I do with that? And I think that's actually where some of this research energy came from, was like, how do I solve that feeling that feels awful? And so that tension is actually a big part of what I think led me down this path. So back to your question of, what's the technology that really changes the game? For us, as I already mentioned, it's the digital printing technology, which thankfully we have a really good partner in HP. They were the first to market with this technology, being able to print digitally on flexible materials. that largely opens up the door for being able to print very customized, very high quality things in a very small scale. And I think one of the things that's probably worth highlighting is that one of the big ethoses for why either of our companies ever has existed is because we're really trying to create leverage points for the small businesses to truly compete with the larger businesses, because we really believe that small businesses change the game. They'll be the future of everything, and they are more adaptable. They're the bread and butter. So if we can really support small businesses, we think that's going to lead to a better economy, a better future for everyone. So
how
that scaling has helped.
How accessible is WildKind so that these smaller businesses can get a hold of them, be part of this solution, utilize this solution?
How accessible? Can you explain that question?
Cost-wise, cost. Is there minimums? I mean, when I think about accessibility, I think about some of the challenges that come along for food and beverage companies. Sometimes they have to meet very large demands. The buy is just too big. So, I mean, those, when I think of accessible, I want it to, is it affordable? Does it have smaller amounts that you can start off with? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's why the digital printing was important. And so we could get what has traditionally been an order. Like if you wanted to order a normal package run, it would be like 200,000 plus pieces. And it's like, how does a small business do that? With digital, you can go as small as one, which is huge. Think being able to remove those minimums, especially if you're sticking to our standard sizes, and that's a whole different, way of thinking about eliminating waste in the packaging process, which there's significant, but we found ways to limit that. But yeah, being able to bring that 200,000 piece order down to one, or if you need a custom size, we'll say 5,000, makes it approachable for your farmers market brand. If they go to different, it's amazing to be able to walk down a farmers market and be like, we made that for them, and they're able to still make a profit. That's a huge deal. I think when we were getting into it, the compostable film supply, and it still is today, it's still difficult to navigate. There's still not a lot of suppliers there. But when we were getting into this, everyone was saying, you can't do that. It's going to be 4 times more expensive than anything else on the market, and you guys are just not going to be able to compete. Well, they were wrong. And the reason they were wrong is because you can manipulate with a digital press, you can manipulate how many different designs you can put right next to each other on let's say a 30-inch roll. And now all of a sudden, instead of printing that one job, you're printing 3 or 4 on that same roll, and you're able to create significantly more efficient process so that every one of those brands can take a benefit of that. So you don't have to change out these metal printing plates for every different design variation. Every single piece that comes off that press can be unique. And that has changed the game for accessibility in terms for these small businesses. In addition to that press, the other big factor that has changed the game for WildKind and for the accessibility of compostable substrates has been this technology called E-beam. It's in this. What traditionally happens is, for a package, you have 3 different layers. You have the food sealant layer that touches the food. You have the print layer, which is where the ink goes. And then in a normal process, you put an additional layer of film on top of that print layer to protect the print so it doesn't scratch off during distribution or retail. Well, with the E-beam, we don't need that 3rd layer to protect that print. We can print straight on to that 2nd layer. We put, it's a coating on it, whether that's a matte or a gloss, whatever your brand desires. And then we E-beam cure it. What that means is what we're doing is we're shooting electrons at that substrate, and we're cross-linking the ink into that 2nd layer at the molecular level, which prevents it from being able to be scratched off. That's really important for a number of reasons. One, we don't have to do a normal curing process, which is like you put an adhesive on it, you have to wait for it to cure for 48 hours. That may or may not succeed in its adhesion, and then you may have waste. We don't have to do that because we're cross-linking it and it's dry right off the press. The other thing is you reduce that 3rd layer, which is necessary for compostable certification processes. By reducing that 3rd layer, it's easier for those 2 layers to break down in a natural process, which you need, right? For it being able to be biodegraded in nature. Having less material is a good thing, and less chemical, less adhesive is a good thing. So those two machines in combination have really opened up the potential for compostable packaging.
So I'm wondering, because when you're talking about this, what I think about is the education for the consumer,
Sure.
because a lot of times we order products and they do come in relatively thoughtful packaging that is either sustainable or recyclable or something. But I'm wondering what role education plays for you. I know that the consumers the founders that you're talking to know about this, right? But is there anything that you guys feel like you are communicating to educate, the consumer, so it becomes a greater demand for those founders?
It's a great question. I think the consumer education piece is largely not on our shoulders, because we don't really have that direct connection to the consumers. So we really do rely on our education to the brand owners, and then allow them to, we'll support them with the education and knowledge base to help them create marketing campaigns or PR pushes to their social media or email or whatever that helps communicate to their consumer base what it is that is different about the packaging and how to interact with it at the end of life. And that's the best way that we've been able to create leverage. We're still a small team. We started at the beginning of last year. And so I think there's a lot of ways that we're trying to create that leverage without having to, hire an inordinate amount of people to do that. But in combination with the brand founders, we also are part of certain organizations that are able to pool resources to help with this kind of messaging too. So greenblue.org or Sustainable Packaging Coalition, they do a lot of lobbying efforts to help kind of push that education forward and create resources that we can then share, or the brand founders can share across their network.
That's great, because I think it really is important, whether they're doing it through social, whether they're communicating it at the time of purchase, right? But it also then makes me think about all the food delivery, right? I mean, do you ever do food delivery?
Like me, myself?
Yeah, I mean, do you order lunch? Do you order dinner? Do you order your groceries? Do you do any delivery?
Yeah, I guess we do food delivery. We do grocery orders. Yeah, here in Austin, that'll be delivered to our house. Sure.
I am is because I'm born and raised in New York City, where we would get food delivered before we had Caviar and DoorDash and Seamless Web, and you would just call the restaurant and they would deliver, and you had all this packaging. And so I'm curious if down the road that's something that you guys might get into, because it seems like they're ripe for some sustainable packaging.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work being done in that space. I would love to get to a place where we are manufacturing a wide variety of packaging that's all kind of geared towards this like compostable story, and it's better for the planet, et cetera. That takes a significantly different set of machinery. So I think that would be, maybe 5-10 years down the line when we're a lot larger to be able to have enough space for that stuff. But yeah, I mean, as it is, the machinery that we have takes a whole production floor, like it's huge. So I think it would be tough to get into anytime soon.
Yeah. I was just curious, because I do know, and I do think that people are more conscious around what they're buying, whether it's coffee from La Colombe and it's getting delivered, or it's your groceries. Now, my groceries I order from Good Eggs, and you can give them back your boxes and your ice packs. So that, that to me is a good solution. I don't know what they're doing with it, but I presume they're reusing it.
I hope so. Yeah, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I mean, that's what everything that we have in our like modern day convenient society. There's going to be so many businesses that have to jump in and do these things, because to have one company be able to supply all of those it'd be a pretty big company to do all that.
For sustainable packaging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the closest thing we could do, we can, like you said, the coffee bags, if you want to ship and mail something in the mail, like we can create those sleeves, and that's fine. And I think there is a big demand for that with a lot of these direct to consumer brands. And that's part of the reason we went with flexible packaging, is because it's versatility. But when you get into these like hard molded, things or these boxes that have like specific coating on the inside for preventing, leaks and stuff like that. It's a very different world, and a lot of those things have forever chemicals in them as well, PFAS, which is not something we want to touch. Luckily, with our current process, everything we have is PFAS free, so we want to keep it that way. Yeah.
So I just want to go back to the beginning a little bit when you said that this is under a subsidiary that you work with. So for the other founders that are watching, are listening, either or, I'd love to better understand what that meant for you in terms of building out your business financially and what role they were able to play, or, and what that kind of looked like, how you were able to sketch that out. Because it sounds really great. Like you've got all these great resources, but I don't know what that meant that you either had to give up or compromise on. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I'll answer that as best I'm able to. I think, again, what makes this possible is kind of how unique it is in the way that the main company is an employee-owned business. So whenever the decision was made to also invest in WildKind and help it start up, it is wholly owned by the parent company. And as a result of that, all of the employees are able to get a benefit as WildKind grows. So it is unique in that it's 100% employee owned through and through.
That's getting more popular these days.
It is, and I think it needs to be. Honestly, that's the right way to do business in my mind. Like if your employees are, putting their blood, sweat, and tears into something, they should really be able to get a wealth benefit from it. And so I'm really, really happy to be part of a company that sees that and understands that and is allowing the employees to own it.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you sharing your journey and everything about WildKind and how you got there, because I think it's a really great inspiration for others that want to innovate, maybe are working somewhere, can figure out how to collaborate or leverage their resources and their background. Where in the past, it sounds a little scary to do that because you kind of keep it on the down low.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of headwinds right now for a number of reasons. There's tailwinds as well. I think some of the regulatory changes across the nation, the extended producer responsibility regulations that are still trying to kind of get figured out, both in North America and in Europe, are great potentially as a tailwind to help us really kind of explode. What the challenges are, there are a lot of the definitions and policymaking, that everyone will try to find different ways of navigating it and getting around it. And compostable materials oftentimes aren't included in those. So where it could be a tailwind, it can also be a bit complicated and make the education process that we have for brand owners even more difficult. So that part is murky at best. But I think there's a lot of pushback against ESG stuff right now. BlackRock has pulled out a lot of their ESG funding and what that means for a lot of companies trying to do good for the planet. But I am optimistic. I think being able to be a business that can model this idea of kind of steward leadership, the idea of how do you create a culture that is, it is a for-profit business, but how do you create a culture that is collectively looking at what is best for not just our employees, not just our customers, not just the profit, but what's also best for a collective future that doesn't have a voice in today's day, right? Like the climate issue is a future issue that they don't get to speak up for. So how can you try to help those future generations is a big part of the ethos. And I think most of my time is around how do we make sure that everyone that's working in this business are making decisions and keeping those frameworks in their mind as they navigate and make decisions about what print varnish do we put on our packaging? That's relevant. Do we put a print varnish on there that's going to be a PFAS thing, that's a forever chemical or not? And having them be empowered to make that decision, knowing that it's about what affects the future generations, I think is huge. And the packaging industry needs a lot more people doing that, unfortunately.
Are there any hard-hitting statistics that you know about that show the impact of using your packaging and how it relates to businesses becoming completely sustainable?
Kind of like a life cycle analysis. I think we haven't gotten full numbers on that. And I think this is one of those things that can be tough in this space is I definitely understand the desire and the need to like have all those metrics and numbers. And on a case by case basis, we are more than willing to work with people to do that. And we have different consultants that we work with and will help us kind of navigate that for individual brands. But it really does vary brand to brand because we might have to source a different material for a particular brand because of their barrier needs. So as a whole for a company, it's a really difficult thing to answer. And in an ideal world, we'd be able to answer all of it. And, these different third-party certification bodies, BPI and TÜV, which is a more global standard, have a really great idea behind them, but oftentimes end up becoming the barriers preventing brands from adopting better materials because of the extra bureaucracy in processes and money that takes place in order to get those third-party certifications. So it's kind of this really difficult place of like, okay, we know this is a better decision than what is currently available in the status quo. And do we invest, $30,000, 6 months of time for each individual brand that uses us to do that? Probably not, because it'll break our business. So it's kind of this really difficult place.
It may be in the future, right? So this way you can show impact, because I think it is important to know that how does this affect the company's bottom line, right? If they're including sustainable packaging versus not including it, what percentage of their sales is going to drop off, or what percentage of their sales will increase as a result of their ethos and being completely inclusive and following that from beginning to end throughout.
Yeah, and McKinsey & Company and Nielsen IQ did a really large study about that particular question, and they finalized those results last year, I believe. And they do have a lot of those numbers around, okay, this is going to help retain this many customers, like X%, or the brands that do these kinds of things see this much growth. And I would definitely, maybe we can link it in the show notes or something like that, because it is a public.
You could pop that over to me and we can put it in the show notes and maybe add it in our newsletter so that people can take a little.
I think that's a really good thing to reference as a whole for an industry, because they have a lot of the accumulated data for a variety of brands in a variety of industries. I think that's probably a better way to do it.
Jared, thank you so much for joining me today. I enjoyed learning about WildKind and your unique journey and how you got there, because I think that it really is different. It's not, you weren't sitting at your desk saying, oh, I have to do this, or, it wasn't a side hustle. You got the commitment of your company, you did your research, and it was exciting to learn about, and I think inspirational for those that may be in other situations where they could lean on their existing community. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for having me. I'm definitely excited to be part of this journey to make the world a little bit better. And hopefully people that listen to this that want to join in that journey can reach out, and we can just try to make a better education system for everyone out there to get more excited about it.
So what would be the best way for people to get in contact with you to learn more about WildKind?
Yeah, you can go to our website, wildkindpackaging.com is probably the best way to get in touch with us as a whole. We also are very active on social media. So WildKind PKG is our Instagram, and pretty much any of the social media, you can find us that way. That'd probably be the best way to do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right.